Welcome to my video series where I teach you how to create a WhatsApp clone using Svelte and PocketBase. In this video, I won't be getting into any code, but you can see I got all the code ready for you guys inside of my code folder inside of VS Code. But in this video, I'm going to show you guys what the final project will be. Alright, we're in the sign up page and we could log into an existing account or we could sign up by creating a new one. So I'm gonna create a new one. Let's create it. Let's say the name is test@email.com. And for the password, any 8-character or more password will be valid. So then we click sign up. And you can see we have our profile. Test. We could also edit our profile. So like we could change our name to test amazing. You see, test amazing. We could also edit profile again. Let's choose a file. And you see, I have my channel icon selected. And if I click update profile, you see, I have my channel image as my profile picture. You see, even if I restart, it selects. Now you can see I have no conversations yet and I have no conversation selected. So let's create a conversation. You click on this pencil icon and let's create a conversation. Let's search up for I created 2 accounts. I created an account before I showed you guys this display. So let's just search for that account by going over to Daniel Gora. You can see I already have a GIF for that. So we could add the person we want. We could add up to 5 people per conversation. So let's click continue. And once that's done, we have a conversation that automatically has the name of test, comma, Daniel Gora. So it has our names, but even if I change my name, it won't change the title of the conversation because it's created when the conversation is created as well. So you can see we have a danger zone. We could also edit the conversation name if you are an admin. So let's go over to the account and let's open up the conversation. You see, we have the danger zone. We can leave conversation, but we can't delete the conversation like an admin. But we can't edit it either. We can only leave the conversation when you are just a member. But when you're an admin, you see you can edit members. You can go back. You can change the name to Hello World. And let's just change name. You see, it updates. It updated. You can also edit the channel profile, the conversation profile. You see that if we pick a picture that is the right size, meaning that is less than 5 megabytes, I believe, then it will actually update. You see it updated real time. This pencil icon, we go back. We can also edit the members. We could kick this guy out, but if we kick him out, there's only going to be one member in this conversation, and it's going to auto delete. Let's try that out. You see, it automatically deleted. We could also send a message. So let's create a conversation. Wait, let's go right here. Continue. Let's go to test and amazing. We could send text, message. We could also delete the text message if we want. And let's just send a text message from the other user. You see in the view, our profile picture, our name, and our text message is displayed. So let's just say whatever. You see, we get it in real time. But since we are an admin, we could also delete the messages of other people. But the other people can't delete our messages. They can only delete their own. So if we delete our messages, our message from the other user, you see, in real time, it disappeared. So you can see what, and it works. And if I try to send an empty message, it won't send. So now we could also click this plus icon to choose a file, and we can upload a file, submit, and you see a muscular man gets uploaded. And in real time, we get the picture. We could also say what, and it gets sent. We could also delete the picture, and it'll get deleted in real time. We could also log out. Let's sign out. Let's log in again. So let's say test@email.com. Let's use our password. And it saves. You see that is persisted. Now, if we go over to PocketBase, you see that we have two collections, one of the actual conversation, and it's stored in JSON. And you can see the users is stored inside PocketBase. Alright, so in the previous video, I'm linking up into the cards right now. I showed you guys the preview for my full WhatsApp clone using Svelte and PocketBase. We're actually going to set up the project, but we're not going to get into any code. So you see I have an empty editor, open up an empty editor yourself. So let's open up a new editor, a new terminal, and run npm init svelte at latest because we use some of the latest features. And click correct, hit enter, click yes, select the skeleton project, and make sure you use TypeScript syntax, no additional options. Now, let's install the dependencies. So let's run npm install PocketBase, UUID, and Svelte icons. Now let's install the dev dependencies. Let's go npm i-save dev at types/UUID. Now let's close the terminal. And let's go over to the PocketBase docs. I'll link it up in the GitHub link in the description. You could also find this link over at pocketbase.io/docs. So now let's download the link to the PocketBase. Download the PocketBase for your machine. And I'm on Mac, so I'm gonna download for Mac OS. Get this download that you get. Drag it over to your VS Code project. Select copy folder. Let's rename this to just PocketBase. And now let's open up a new terminal and let's open PocketBase first of all. And then let's run /PocketBase serve. And let's open up the admin UI by going to this address right here. And now let's create an account. So now once you're in here, go over to edit collection in the users, look over to API rules. And now let's see the view rule. We're gonna set this to none, and we're gonna set this to none, and press save changes. And now click the new collection button, and it's gonna be conversations. Let's create a new field. This is gonna be plain text, the name, and this is gonna be a non-empty. Let's create a new field. That's gonna be a JSON object, which is gonna be the messages. Let's create another one, a photo, so file called photo, and inside of here, this can be empty, but we're gonna set the restrictions. Let's search for image, and one of them is gonna be PNG, JPG, GIF. So let's search for GIF. Wait, let's just search for it right here, GIF. And also, we could also submit SVGs. Wait, SVG. Now let's close the edit for the photo, and let's create a new field, which is gonna be a JSON called members. Let's also create another field, a JSON object for the admins. And finally, let's create a file object, but this isn't going to be just a single file. This is going to be multiple, and the name of this field is going to be message photos. And the reason it's multiple and not single like here is because all of the user's messages that are images are going to be uploaded into this file, or at least into this file directory. So now let's do the same MIME type for the message photos. So it's going to be PNG, JPG, JPEG, GIF. Let's do GIF right here, and then SVG. So now let's set the members to non-empty and the admins to not empty. And now let's go to the API rules. And in the list/search rule, we're going to do at request.auth.id. does not equal to an empty quote, basically saying that the user has to be authenticated, and also the user has to be a member. So members each basically means that at least one of these items has to be the request .auth.id. So the request.auth.id, basically the ID of the user, has to be inside the members array. So let's copy this rule and let's also paste it in here, and let's paste it in here for the create. But instead of members, we say at request.data.admins. And the reason we say at request.data.admins and not just admins is because we are creating it, so there is no past admins that we could reference. For example, in these rules we're referencing the past members that we already have stored, but in here we're seeing the data, the actual admins that they're sending in to our server. So in the update rule, let's leave it as for admins, and let's create this. Oh wait, let's make sure this is set to not members. Let's make sure it's set to not member. Let's make sure it's set to member. And let's set this to at request and at request. Let's create. All right, in this video, we're going to set up the project so in the next episode, we can actually implement the authentication logic. So let's get straight into the code. In the source folder, find the lib folder and create a new file inside that folder called main.css. In here, let's import a font. All right, once you're done importing the font family, so now let's set the margin on the body to none. But first of all, let's set the color, primary text color, background color, dash primary color. Let's set the overflow to hidden so you can't scroll. And on every single property, we set the margin to 0. And we set the font family to the font family we imported, which is going to be Lato and sans serif. Now let's close the CSS file. And let's create a new file called types.ts. So types.ts. So let's export a type called user. So user is going to have an ID property, which is going to be a string. It's going to have a an email, and a name, which are all strings. And this will be a photo, which can be an optional property. So now we're going to export a function called validate user, which takes in a data, which is going to be type any. So they can literally input any property they want. And we're going to validate and we're going to check to see if the data is a user. So we're going to say ID is string is equal to type of data.id is equal to string. And let's do this 3 times. One for the email and one for the photo. It'll be email and then photo. And then we're going to return ID is string. And we're just going to return these booleans compounded. So then let's export another type called export type conversation. And let's set the name to string, a photo optionally to string, the members to a string array. So basically the members is going to be a string of the user IDs. We're also going to set an admins, which is basically the same thing as the members, but for the admins. We're going to set the messages. So message array, and we're going to create the message type in a second. So then we set the message photos, which is going to be a nullable property. It's going to be string array. And now we're going to create a message type. It's going to contain a user ID of string, ID of string, content of string, a content type of message or image, and a created property, which is going to be the date at which this message is created, which is going to be a string. So now let's fix a bug in the validate user function. Instead of photo is a string, we say name is string. Let's rename this. So now let's close this file. Now let's create a new file called PocketBase.ts, in which we're going to export a writable store, which is going to be of type PocketBase or undefined. So by default, we're going to set it to undefined. And let's import the PocketBase from the PocketBase class from PocketBase. From PocketBase. So now here we're going to say set. So if we're not in the browser, we're going to return. And then we're going to say const PocketBase instance is equal to new PocketBase. We're going to do HTTP localhost 8090. And then we're going to say PocketBase instance dot auth store. So we're basically going to load the cookie of the user. So document.cookie. And we're going to set it to the PocketBase instance. So now let's export another writable. So const user store. But instead of writable, we're going to set a derived store, which is going to take in one store, which is going to be the PB store. And then it's going to be a type user or undefined. Let's set this to the PB. So now we say if PB is null, or if the browser, or if we're not in the browser, we set the user store to undefined, and we return. So now we say const auth model is equal to pb dot auth store dot model, and then we're gonna validate the auth model, saying that if the auth model is not a user, so validate user auth model. We're gonna set undefined. So now we're gonna set this to undefined, and then we're just gonna return. And now once we actually know that this auth model is a user, we say const collection unsubscribe is equal to pb dot collection. So we're gonna get the user's collection that we created previously in the previous episode. And we're gonna subscribe to it, saying that we want all of the users that have the ID of our auth model. So we're gonna say event so now if event dot action is equal to delete, we're gonna say pb dot auth store dot clear, and we're gonna set to undefined. Else we're gonna say pb dot auth store dot set dot save pb dot auth store dot token. I'm gonna say record. Wait, let's rename this to E. Let's set this to E. And now we're gonna get the auth model. So const auth model is equal to pb dot auth store dot model. So let's validate the auth model. So now, when this user store gets destroyed, we're going to return a synchronous function, which we're going to await collection unsubscribe. Oh, let's do it like this. So let's create another store of all the conversations the user has had. So we're going to say conversation store. You go to derived, type of PB, and we're going to have a type of conversation and record model array or undefined. So now for the array of the dependencies, we're just going to have the PB array. And for the function, we're going to have PB, set, and update. Let's import these types. So let's make sure this is a comma. So now if we're not in the browser or PB doesn't exist, we're going to set undefined and we're going to return. Now let's import the auth model, which is equal to pb.auth store.model. And the same thing we do here, we just validate that the auth model is actually a user. And now we're going to say conversation collection is equal to pb dot collection dot, which is going to be record model and conversation. So it's the record model conversation. Now the conversation collection dot get full list. So we're going to get the full list initially of the actual conversations that we are part of. And now we're going to say dot then. Now we're going to get the data and we're going to set data. So initially we get the full list and then we set the actual data of the store to the full list. So then we listen to the conversation store. So subscribe, we're going to say star. And the reason we're getting all of the documents is not because we actually want to get all the documents and store it locally, is because we already set the rules for the subscribe function in the conversation collection in the previous video. So by default, we're only going to get the stores or the conversations that we are actually part of. So if the data.action, we're going to create a switch. So we're going to say case create, break, and now we're going to update previous conversations. And now we're just going to return an array of data.record. And then dot 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 previous conversations or an empty array. So now if we create a new conversation and we are part of it, we just insert the data.record and we just insert the previous conversations that we've had. So now we do case delete. And let's do another update call. Previous conversations. And now we're just going to do previous conversations or an empty array dot filter conversation dot id does not equal to data dot record.id, and then we're just gonna do a break, and then case update. So if the conversation does get updated, we're gonna get the previous conversations. And we're gonna break. Conversation found is equal to previous conversations, or an empty array dot find conversation dot id data.record.id. So basically we're gonna find the actual conversation, then we say if the conversation does not exist or previous conversations does not exist, we just return the previous conversations. So now let's return previous conversations.map conversations. No, this is supposed to be an AND operator. And let's remove this question mark. So then we say if the conversation.id is equal to data.record.id, then we're going to return data.record, and then we're just going to return conversation if it's not actually part of the record. So now let's create one new store where it's going to be cached users. So basically every time we want to get the users, we don't actually want to create a fetch call to PocketBase every time we want to get the image. We want to cache the user, and we want to keep them as long as the session is available. So we say cached users is a derived type of PB and type of conversation store. And this is just going to be a map with the identifier being a string, and every single object maps to a user. So then for the dependencies, we say PB and conversation store. And then we say PB conversation. Then we also have the set and update property. So if we get the cached users, so let's get the current cached users, and if it is null, then we set it to this. And then we say if the conversation is null, or if the PB store is null, we set to an empty object, and let's return. So now I say const auth model is equal to pb.auth store.model. So we say if auth model, so if the auth model is not exist, then we set an empty array, and then we return. So then let's do let previous users is equal to get cached users, const user IDs result get users IDs, some previous users conversation, and auth model.id. So let's create the function. So let's say function get users IDs, and we're going to say previous users is going to be a user, is going to actually be a map with the identifier being a string that maps to a user. The second parameter be a conversations, which is going to be conversation and record model array, and the third one is just going to be the user ID string. So we're going to say let equal is equal to true. Then we say const result is equal to conversations dot reduce. That's going to be a string array. And we're going to say previous value, current conversations. So we're going to say for const member of current station.members if the previous value dot includes member and the previous user's member does not exist and the member is not us. So if we are not part of the member, we're going to push this to previous users. No previous value dot push member. And we're going to say equal is equal to false. And then we're just going to return a previous value. And it's going to be an empty array as the initial property. Then we're going to return the result and if it is equal. Oh, let's set this right here. Let's make sure to fix this error. Cached users. And there's going to be conversations. Let's close this file. This function. Then we're going to get the user IDs. User IDs result. And then we're going to check if the user ID result, if it is equal. So if the user IDs have not changed, we're not going to actually do a full query. We're just going to return. Say const users query is equal to users IDs dot reduce. User IDs dot reduce. And this is going to reduce to a string. We're going to get the previous value and the current user. Then we're going to get the query string, which is going to be ID is equal to the current user. So if the previous value is equal to an empty array, empty string, my bad. Empty string, we're going to return query string. If not, we're going to return the query string interpolated with our previous value. Initial value will be an empty string. So now we're going to do pb.collection user and record model. So we're going to get the users store dot get full list. And we're going to filter through the user's query. So we're going to get that full list. And then once we queried it, we're going to get the result. And then we're going to update the previous users. And we're going to say const new users is equal to result dot reduce into a map of ID and string user. So we're going to say previous value. We're going to get the previous value and also the current user. And the initial property will be an empty array. An empty object. Say previous value of the current user.id is equal to current user. And then we're just going to return previous value. Then we're just going to say if the previous users is null, then we return new users. If the previous user is not null, then we return the previous users concatenated with the new users. Oh, let's fix this error right here with the conversations. And let's also fix this typo that I made right over here. Let's exclude that S. And now it'll be good to go. We could close this file. And now in the app.d.ts, let's go into locals uncommented, set it to the top, and we're going to say PocketBase. So by default, the PocketBase will be the PocketBase class and also the PocketBase admin. So we're going to have two different PocketBases, one for the regular user and one for the admin. We have this separation because some actions can only be taken by admins, and we need to actually verify to see if the user has permission to do the action. So by default, this is not exported as a child property. Let's fix that. And let's close this file. And let's create a new file called the hooks.server.ts. I'm going to say export const handle is equal to async. This means asynchronous property with an event and resolve property taken in. And then we're going to say event.locals, so locals.pocketbase is equal to new instance of PocketBase. Let's make sure to fix this import. So we're going to create a try catch block. Error. So if there is an error, we just say event.locals.pocketbase.authStore.clear. So let's clear the PocketBase auth store. So then the locals.pocketbase.authStore.load from cookie event.request.get cookie. Let's do request.headers actually. And if the cookie header does not exist, we just add an empty array, an empty string. And then we're going to await event.locals.pocketbase.collection users.auth refresh. So we're going to validate to see if the actual user exists. And then we're going to do the same thing, but for the administrator. So it's going to be PocketBase admin. So this is going to be PocketBase admin.admins.auth with password. And here we're not going to do auth refresh. And instead of clearing the authentication, we're just going to throw fail 500. Let's import fail from Svelte right there. And if you want to get access to these, let's create an environment file. So .env. And we're going to create two variables just like this. Wait, let's close this error. Open this up. And now right here, just input your email and password that you chose for your admin account. Here we can import these. We can import these like this. Because we're not running SvelteKit in our terminal, it doesn't give me autocomplete. So make sure to run npm run dev if you want to get autocomplete for these auto-generated types. So then we get auto import right now, and you see it works. So now let's do pb.set to event.locals.pocketbase. No, not PocketBase admin, to just the standard PocketBase. So we're going to say the response is equal to await resolve event, and then we're going to say response dot headers dot set cookie. So we're going to tell the browser set the cookie of the locals.pocketbase dot auth store dot export to cookie, and we're going to say the same site is equal to true, secure is equal to false, and we're also going to say HTTP only is equal to false. And then we're just going to return the response. By the way, in the hooks.server.ts file, let's just await the auth with password, because this is a asynchronous function and we need to await it for it to be actually valid. Alright, so in the previous video we set up the authentication. So in this video we're gonna actually set up the authentication logic. So let's get straight into the code. So in the routes folder, let's create a new file called +layout.svelte. And in here, we're gonna include a script tag, and we're gonna import $lib. So from the lib folder, we're gonna import main.css. So now let's create a slot, and that's it. Let's close this file. So let's delete the +page.svelte file, and let's also create a new folder inside the routes folder called auth, but inside of parentheses. Inside of here, we're gonna create a new file called +layout.server.ts. So then we're gonna export const load is equal to an asynchronous function that takes in the locales, so locals, and basically we're going to check that the user is actually validated and that we are not actually accessing the wrong data that we are not supposed to. So now, if we want to get autocomplete for this load function, we're going to have to run npm run dev inside the terminal and keep it running for the duration of this tutorial. So let's close the terminal. And then if it is valid, so if the user is actually logged in, we're just going to redirect to slash. And if not, we're just going to return an empty object, and this function satisfies layout server load. Let's make sure to wrap this in parentheses. Layout server load. And let's close this file. And then let's create a new file inside the auth folder called +layout.svelte. We're going to include a script tag. We're going to import page from $app/stores. So then let's create the markdown. We're going to create a section that contains a main that contains a section. We're going to do a key block. So key and /key. And inside of this key block, so every time the page store, the URL path name changes, we're going to update and rerun this code. So we're going to create a container div that contains our slot. So then let's create the styles. So now let's apply some styles to the section. And inside the container class, then we're going to do a media call. So a media query that states if the minimum width is greater than 700 pixels, we're going to apply these styles. So in the section class, So let's close this file. And then in the auth folder, let's create a new folder called sign up. And inside of this folder, let's create a new file called, plus page.server.ts. So now let's export the actions. So let's create a default action. So const actions is equal to an object that's going to contain one item, which is going to be the default function. So request and locals. And now we're going to say if the user is logged in, .authStore.is valid. So if the user is logged in, we're just going to return. We're not going to actually run any of the logic. So we're going to get the form data. So await request form data. We're going to see the name is form data get name. I'm going to say the email is equal to form data get email. And we're going to say the password is equal to form data get password. Now let's create a try catch block. And now let's validate to make sure that these properties are actually set to the right types. So we're going to say so once you're done validating, we're going to get we're going to access the user's collection. So we're going to get a reference to it. Saying users collection is equal to locales .pocketbase .collection users. I'm going to say const result is equal to await users collection get first item. I'm going to say name is equal to name. So we're going to check if this is actually coming from PocketBase. If error.status undefined. And if not, we're just going to throw the error. So basically what this does is it checks the user's collection to make sure that there is no other user with the same name as the user we're trying to create. So I'm going to say if the result is undefined, or no, if we've actually found a user with the same name, we're going to say throw new error. Name is already taken. Right here, let's fix this error. Let's have the end quote right here. So now let's await the user's collection dot create, and let's just set the email, password, name, password confirm is going to be the password, and then we're going to set the email visibility is equal to true. And now we're just going to await locales dot pocketbase dot collection users dot auth with password. We're just going to say that we're just going to pass in the email and the password. So basically we create the user and then we sign into their account. So now if we throw an error, we're just going to say if the error is an instance of error, we're going to return name, email, and password. So basically we'll return the cached values of the name, email, and password that we passed in. I'm going to say error is equal to unknown. Error occurred when signing up user. So now by default, if it wasn't an instance of error, we're just going to say the error was error dot message Or actually, if the error is actually an instance of error, we're going to set it to the error.message, and we're going to say name, email, and password. And by default, we're just going to redirect back to the home page. Let's import redirect. So then let's close this file, and in the sign up folder, let's create a new file called pluspage.svelte. And first of all, let's create a script with the lang set to TS, so TypeScript. We're going to import, or we're actually going to export let form is equal to action data. So let's import the action data type. Let's let it load for a second, but we're going to set a section with a class of content container with a div of headers, and that has an h1 that has the text of sign up, and a paragraph that has the class of subtitle. Class subtitle. And then this is going to say create your account and start messaging your friends now, exclamation point. So make sure to import action data. And by the way, if you don't get these autocomplete for Svelte kit, just go over to your terminal and run npm run dev in the terminal to make sure you get the autocomplete for the auto-generated types. So now, let's create a form with the method of post. And by default, we don't need to specify an action because we're going to automatically map to the default action. So let's just do div with a class of inputs with 3 inputs. One input is a name input. We're going to set the name is equal to name. And let's copy this down a few more times. And the placeholder is name. Let's delete these for now. We're going to set the default value to form.name. And if the form.name does not exist, we're just going to set it to an empty string. So let's copy this down a few more times. And we're going to have one input for the name, one input for the email. So it's going to be an email type. And the placeholder is going to be email. And the value is going to be email. Password. Or else going to set the password for the default type. And now if there's an error, we set it below the input. So we're going to do an else if block if form dot error. We're going to set p dot error to form dot error. So now we're going to set a button with a type of submit, button submit, and it's just going to say sign up. And below this, let's create a section with a class of link container. And we're going to set a paragraph that says already have an account. So if they already have an account, we want to link them to the login page. So we're going to set an anchor tag to /login page. Login. So now let's open up Svelte. So let's go to PocketBase. No, actually, it's because the PocketBase is not running. So let's open a PocketBase, cd PocketBase, and let's go /PocketBase serve. And as you can see, if we restart the server, it works. Although it has the default ugly styles with the font that we actually imported, you can see that the inputs are bland, the button is not how we want it to be, and the link is just a normal link. So now, instead of writing all the styles, which can get very tedious, all I'm going to do is open up the GitHub. By the way, the GitHub is in the link in the description. So open it up. Let's go to the source folder. Let's go to routes, auth, sign up, page.svelte. Let's copy these styles. Let's paste them in. And you can see that we have a header, some padding, some paragraph text, some nice looking inputs, and a link that actually looks nice. So you can see that if we create a random name, for example, an account that says with the name of test, with the test at email.com, I'm gonna do test. But let's just test out an invalid password. So you see, password must be at least 8 characters in length. So if we sign up, you see that we get redirected to the slash page. So now let's actually log out. If you want to manually log out without an actual log out button, you can go to the application tab or the source tab in, or the storage tab in Safari. And you could go over and see the cookies in localhost, and you see the pb_auth cookie. Just delete that. And you could close this again, and you can see it redirected. And if we go to sign up page, you can see that we're not redirected anymore. And if we even open up the PocketBase admin UI, you can see that we created a user. Actually, let's remove this user because I user. So now we can literally copy and paste the sign up logic into the login logic that we're going to create right now. So create a login folder inside the auth folder and create a file called plus page.server.ts. And we could literally copy this and go into login and paste that in. And instead of passing in the name, we remove the name. Let's delete this line. So let's also delete the validation for the name. And let's delete this. And we could even remove the logic to check if there are any other people that have our same name. So you can see that the login is much more leaner than the sign up because all we're doing is just validating the input and logging in. So let's actually create the UI for the login page. So let's go plus page.svelte. And all we could do is copy this, copy, and paste. And let's just edit a few of the styles. I mean, a few of the things. Oh wait, we remove this. And instead of sign up, we say log in. And we link this to sign up page. And it's going to be sign up. And we say don't have an account. And for the title, let's have a login. And then we can say log into your account and start messaging your friends now. So now if we open this up and we go to login page, you see that we can go back and forth between login and password. So let's say the name is test at email.com, test. So if we sign up, we get redirected. Let's go to storage. Let's remove the cookie. Refresh. And let's go to slash sign up. And let's go log in. Test at email.com. Oh, you see, it worked. All right, so in this video, we're going to set up the actual home page for our application. All right, so before we get into any code, we're going to open up the terminal, run npm, run dev. And we're also going to open up a new terminal instance and open up the PocketBase folder and run /PocketBase. Oh, wait, no, /PocketBase serve. And then we can close the terminal and leave those two terminal instances running. So in the routes folder, No, actually in the lib folder, let's create a new folder called components. And here let's create a new file called conversations navbar dot svelte. So then we're going to create a script tag with the language tag set to TS and also the context set to module. So we're going to say type component events is equal to curly brace. And we're also going to do two events. Open user nav, which is going to have the parameter of null. And the open create conversation, which is going to be a mouse event and an object that contains the current target, which is going to be an event target and HTML anchor element. So now that that's all done and set. Oh wait, no, let's set the context to module. And then let's create another script below this with the language property set to TS. So in here, we're going to export let auth model is equal to user. So we can do that right now. We could import type user from $lib/types. So then we're going to do a dispatch event function. So we're going to do create event dispatcher. And we're going to import that from Svelte, but at first we got to import it manually. So we got to do create event dispatcher from Svelte. And then we'll call this and we'll give it the generic type of component events. And right here, you see these properties on the current events type. These map to specific events that we could call using the dispatch events. For example, if I were to dispatch event open user nav, then you see it does nothing. It requires no other parameters. But if I were to say open create conversation, you see it's invalid and I have to pass in the actual event. So let's close this. And let's say as if block. So if the PB store is valid, so if it's yes. So when we say if the PocketBase store does not have null as its value, we're going to create a nav with the class of hide. And we're also going to set the conditional class of show to at page.url.pathname is equal to slash. So if we're in the home page, we actually show the nav bar. So we're going to do import the page store from the svelte/stores module. Let's create a header element. And here let's create a div with a class of user information. And we're going to have an onClick event on list. And we're going to set this to dispatch event open user nav. So whenever you click on this user information div, it opens up the user nav. But we'll create the user nav in the next episode. But right now, let's just populate this with div. And it's going to have the class of user image and as if block. We're going to say auth model.photo and auth model.photo.length is greater than 6. Oh wait, actually 0 length. So we're going to do an image. And the source is going to be at pb.files.get URL auth model.photo. No, actually auth model.photo. So we basically get the URL for the photo right here using this. And the alt is just going to be the auth model.name. So the name of the user. Or else we just put FA user circle, and we'll import that component now. Actually, let's fix this. Import this from $app/stores. So let's import the icon. Like, let's see. Let's do quick fix. Let's just ignore these accessibility issues. So let's create two spans, one for the user name and one for the user email. So it's gonna have auth model dot email, and this is gonna have, instead of the email, it's gonna have the actual name of the user. So auth model dot name. So below this div with the user information, we're gonna have an anchor tag. We're gonna set the hrefs to slash create conversation. I'm gonna say on click. We're gonna do event dispatch event open create conversation, and also we're gonna pass in the event. So inside we're gonna have an icon that says IOMD create, and for the class of this anchor tag we're gonna say is create conversation. So basically, whenever they click this link, we want them to be able to create the conversation. And the reason we do an on click and just not a regular anchor tag behavior is because we actually want create conversation page to pop over the content that we're usually seeing. So then let's import this icon like so. We're gonna import it from IO and just say like this. So now below the header, we're gonna create a section with the class of conversations view. We're gonna do an as if block. We're gonna do an as if else block. And in the else, we're gonna say dot no conversation, no conversations. And we're gonna introduce a span that says no conversations yet. So now in the if block, we're gonna have a conditional statement that says at conversation store. So alongside the PB store, we can also import the conversation store. So if we actually have conversations and we have conversation store, wait, let's make this like that. Dot length is greater than 0. We're gonna create a constant, so a local constant for this, and this is gonna be the sorted conversations is equal to conversation store dot sort. I'm gonna do a b return new date b dot messages 0 dot created, or b dot created dot get time minus, and we're gonna do the exact same thing but for a. So basically we're gonna sort by dates. So now that we have the sorted conversations, we can get on with the logic. So let's create a s each block. So sorted conversations as conversation. And then I'm gonna say another constant. So const created date is equal to conversation dot messages dot length is greater than 0. So let's do ternary. Let's do new date. Conversation dot messages 0 dot created, or a new date for the conversation dot created. So we're gonna say if there is a message, we're gonna show the date of the last message that they have sent. or the date that the conversation was created. So then we're going to create an anchor tag with the class of conversation link. And this is going to link to slash conversation.id. So if they click this link, they're going to open up the conversation. So let's create a div with the class of conversation information. And inside here, let's create a conversation image. And here, let's create another if block, conversation.photo, and conversation.photo.length is greater than 0. So if it is, or first of all, if it's not, we're going to create a class of icon, and it's going to contain the MD group icon. So let's go and import this right now. So it's going to be an MD. So then right here, let's create the image, and the same thing for the user image we're going to do for this image. So let's just say the $pb dot get file URL conversation, and also conversation dot photo. So we get the thumbnail for the conversation and the alternative. So if it doesn't load, we're just going to say the conversation dot name. So now below this div, the conversation image div, let's create another div with the class of conversation text in information, conversation title, and it's going to contain 2 spans, one with the conversation name and the other which is going to contain as if else created date dot to locale date string is equal to new date dot to locale date string, and then we're going to say created date dot to locale date string. And we're just going to pass in an empty array, and we're going to say that the format is going to be the hour is going to be 2-digit, and the minute is also going to be 2-digit. And if the created date is not actually the date of today, so if the day of the created date for the conversation is not today, that means we're gonna have the created date dot to locale date string just regularly. So below here, so below the conversation text information div, we're gonna create a span with the class of conversation message, and it's gonna contain as if else block conversation dot messages dot length is greater than 0. Then we're gonna also do an as if block, as if else, my bad. So if the conversation dot messages 0 dot content type, so if the content type of the message is equal to message, then we just say the conversation, the actual message information of the message dot content. So we just say the text of the content. And if it's an image, because if it's a message or if it's not a message, it has to be an image. So all we're going to say is just one image. So in here, we're going to say no message if the message's array length is 0. So then let's save this. And below the anchor tag, let's create a HR. And let's go over to the GitHub. You can find the GitHub in the link in the description. So let's go to source. Let's go to the source folder, lib, components, conversation nav bar. And the reason I'm not going through the style one by one is because it's not really important for the actual application. The real importance of the application is seeing how the logic flows from the database to the user to the back end. Let's actually fix this typo right here. These are not supposed to be divs. These are supposed to be spans, span tags. So then right here, I accidentally put the to locale date string. This is going to be actually to locale time. So let's close this file. In the route folder, let's create a new folder, parentheses app. And inside of here, let's create another folder, actually another file called plus layout.server.ts. We're going to export const load is equal to an asynchronous function which takes in the locales, and this satisfies layout server load from $/ types. And remember, if you want to get these autocompletes in your IDE, go to the terminal and run npm run dev while you're coding, because that's going to supply you with the actual automated types by SvelteKit. So we're going to say const auth model is equal to locales.pocketbase dot auth store dot model. And now we're going to say if the auth model does not exist, so if it's null, we're going to redirect to 303/sign up. So let's import redirect. So if the auth model is not a user, so if it's not actually a valid user, let's import the validate user function and let's redirect (303)/sign up, and let's return auth model, and that's it. Let's close this file. And in the app folder, let's create a new folder called sign out. And in this folder, let's create a new file called plus server.ts. So we're going to export const post is equal, has the type of request handler, and it's going to be an asynchronous function. So now if the locals.pocketbase, no, just normal pocketbase.authStore is valid, we're going to return an empty JSON string, an empty JSON object. We're just going to return JSON. So then locals.pocketbase.authStore.clear and throw redirect to of 303 to /sign up. So let's import the redirect function. So you can see that if we actually don't have a valid user ID or valid user session, we don't actually perform any actions. But if we do, we clear the auth store and then we redirect back to the sign up page. So let's close this file. And then in the app folder, let's create a new folder called parentheses conversations. And let's create a file called plus layout.svelte. So let's create a script tag with the language property set to TS. So now, because in this video we're not going to actually cover the create conversation logic, we're just going to set up the actual button to open the create conversation page, but we're not going to implement any logic right now. So let's just export let data, page data. I'm going to let page state is a type of name string which maps to any, and it's going to be let show user nav bar, you go to false. We're going to say page state is equal to at $page dot, does import the page store. So like page from $app/stores. So let's create an asynchronous function called open create conversation. And it's going to be an event that takes in a mouse event. And this event is also going to be having the current target mapped to the event target and HTML anchor element. So if the event.meta key or event.control key, either of these cases, so if the user is clicking down the meta key or the control key, we just return, we don't run logic, we let the anchor tag do its own thing and run its behavior. So if they're not pressing these clicks, these buttons, these keys, we're going to prevent default. I'm also going to get the href. Href is equal to event.current target. And then we're going to do const result is equal to await preload data. Href. You see we don't actually get auto import. Let's import preload data from $app/navigation. So now if the result.type is equal to loaded and result.status is equal to 200, we push state for the, and we give it the href. We say show create conversation is equal to true, and then create conversation data is equal to result.data. Wait, let's set it like this, and let's import the push state function from here. Let's import type page data from $types. So now if we are redirected, let's go to href. Let's import the goTo function from the app navigation module. So now let's attach some events to the Svelte document file, Svelte document component. So on key down. So event. So if page state dot show create conversation, and if event dot key is equal to escape event dot prevent default, and also history dot back. So basically, if they press the escape key while we're showing the create conversation mode out, we're gonna go prevent default, so it's not gonna close the browser, and we're gonna go back on the history, closing the actual mode out. So let's create a main. So let me say conversations navbar. Then we pass in the auth model. Auth model is equal to user store or data.auth model. So let's import import user store from $lib /PocketBase. So then let's also do on open create conversation detail. So we're gonna say, so we're gonna get the detail. We're gonna open create conversation with the detail. Oh, it's because I didn't import. So we're just gonna say on close. We're gonna set the show user navbar to false. So let's also create a key block, and it'll update every time the page dot URL dot path name updates. So slash key. So whenever the path name updates, we're gonna set a section dot hide, and we're also gonna set a conditional statement class show. So we're gonna say at $page dot URL dot path name does not equal to slash, and we're gonna do in fade duration 150. Let's import the fade function, and let's set this just the normal path name. And inside this section, set it to slot. So let's create a as if block. So if page state dot show create conversation. So if it's true, let's create a section dot modal. So inside of this section, I'm gonna say on click. I'm gonna do history dot back. I'm also gonna do a transition of fade duration 100. So inside of this section, we're gonna include the create conversation page. And we're gonna set the data to page state dot create conversation data. We're gonna say is modal is equal to true, and on close history dot back. So let's create this create conversation page. Let's go here to the app folder and let's create a new folder titled create conversation. And let's create a new file in here called plus page.svelte. So in here, let's just have a script lang set to ts. So export let is modal is equal to false. So this is gonna come from dot slash create conversation slash page.svelte. No, wait, this is gonna come like this. And then we're gonna just say export let data page data. So then you can see we have some accessibility issues, but we're just gonna ignore them for now. So let's close this file. And let's go over to GitHub. Go to the route folder, the app folder, conversations, layout.svelte. And here, let's copy this. actually fix some bugs that I left inside the code. So instead of it just being inside the modal, we actually need to create a div that's going to be modal content. And we do on click, stop propagation, and we contain the create conversation page inside of this div. And the other error is here we don't say that it's false, we say that it's true. And here instead of on close is going to be on open user nav. I believe it is. You go here and you can see open user nav. And let's also fix this typo right here. This is conversation, not conversation. And let's go over to the conversations folder and let's create a new file called pluspage.svelte. And here is going to be a relatively simple file, which is just going to specify the title of the actual document. So Svelte head, the title is going to be home. And we're going to create a div that contains a span that says no conversation selected. So then let's go to the pluspage.svelte file in the GitHub and let's copy these styles. And then let's open up the local server. So you see if we open this and we go here, we have the backdrop with the modal. And you see, we have our email, our name, our email, our profile picture, because since we don't have a profile picture, it doesn't show up. It just shows up as an empty image for the default user. But you see we actually have the content. And if we size the screen down to about 700 pixels, you see that it covers the whole screen. Alright, so in this video, we're going to create the actual user navigation bar. So let's get straight into the code. But before we do that, let's make sure to run npm run dev in the terminal. And let's open another terminal instance. Let's open up PocketBase, cd PocketBase, and then we run /PocketBase serve. Once that's done, just close these terminals. And in the components folder, create a new file called usernavbar.svelte. In here, let's create a module script. So context is equal module and lang ts. We're going to type component events. We're going to do close is equal to null. And then we're going to create a script with the lang set to ts. So we're going to create a dispatcher, an event dispatcher. So create event dispatcher with the type of component events. And then we're going to export let auth model is equal to noise of type user. Then we're going to let editing profile is equal to false. And below we're going to create a nav conditional class of hide. So class hide is equal to the page store dot URL dot path name. And also we're going to create a transition on this component. So transition fly x is equal to negative 100% and duration 200 milliseconds and the opacity will be 0.5. Let's import the fly transition. So then let's create a header inside this nav. And this header will contain an h1, a button that also contains a div that has icon. So in the header, let's create account information h1. Make sure this is a div. And inside of here, let's add the icon, the iOS, close circle. Right here, let's copy this. And let's import it like so. So below the header, let's create a section with the class of user nav container and as if else. We're going to do editing profile. So if we are editing the profile, we're going to do a form with the action set to update user information. We're going to do the method post class profile form. We're going to do enc type of multi-part form data because we're going to send images and we need to mark this as multi-part. So we're going to use enhance, and then we're going to return a function that calls this other function that returns the editing profile is equal to false. So now in the form, let's create a div, the input container class that contains a span and also an input with the name of name, and inside the span, let's say this is home. No, this is name, and the value is going to be auth model.name. So in here, let's copy this down one more time, and this is going to be the profile image, and this is going to be type of file, name photo, except, and we're just going to say image slash JPG, image slash PNG, and image slash SVG, and then image slash WebP. So then below this, let's create a button with type of submit with a class of update profile. And this is going to have, no, update profile. And below this, we're going to create a cancel button. So button, cancel. No, wait. Let's do on click. And we're going to set the editing profile to false. Also, let's make sure to add the GIF right here, image slash GIF. This button will have the class of close user nav. And we'll also say on click. We're going to dispatch event close. And we're also going to say that the path name does not equal to slash. The else block, the personal information div that contains an image. Then we're going to create a if block. We're going to do auth model.photo, so we're going to check that the user actually has a photo. And auth model.photo.length is greater than 0. And that the PB store is not null. We're going to create an image with the source set to $PB .files.get URL auth model.photo auth model.name for the alt. So you can see that we get the user's image, and if the user's image does not exist on the user, we're just going to return fa user circle. So let's import it right now. So now below the image class, let's create two spans, one with the class of name and one with the class of email. So it's going to be auth model.name, and this is going to be auth model.email. So now below the personal information div, let's create another div with the class of account actions, be button, and then on click, we're going to set the editing profile to true. So it's going to say edit profile, Now we're going to create a form with the action set to /sign out with the method of post. Inside here, we're just going to create a submit button with a class of log out. And it's just going to say log out. Now you can see that we have a log out form. Also, we have the personal information showing, including the image and the actual information for the user. And if we're going to edit the profile, we have a form to allow them to edit their name or their profile image. So now, let's go over to GitHub. It's in the link in the description. Open up the source folder, the lib folder, the components, go to user navbar.svelte. Let's get this style. So now, once you pasted the styles, we could close this file. And in the conversations folder inside the app, we create a new file called plus page.server.ts. We can do export const actions. We're going to create an update user information. There's going to be an asynchronous function that takes in the requests and the locales. So then we're going to access the auth model from the PocketBase store that we get. So locales.pocketbase.authStore.model. So now if the auth model is equal to null or it is not a valid user, we just throw redirect with the code of 303 to /sign up. So let's create a try catch block. We're going to access the form data, await request dot form data. So const name is equal to form data dot get name. So I'm going to say const photo is equal to form data dot get photo. So you can see that these correlate with the options right here. If we open up the form right here, we have a name input and also a photo input, and these correlate specifically with that. So now let's validate the input. So now once you validated the input, we're gonna create a update object. Update obj is of type record, string, and any. So then we're just gonna include the name, and if photo dot size dot is greater than 0, update obj dot photo is equal to photo. So now we'll await locales dot PocketBase collection users dot update auth model dot id with the update object. We're just gonna catch if there's an error, say console dot error. Now in the catch block, we check if the error is an instance of error. We'll just return the error is an error.message. And if not, we just return error unknown error occurred when updating profile. So by default, outside of the try catch block, we'll just throw redirect 03 to just the slash page. So now let's open up the file that we edited in the previous video, the plus layout.svelte. On top of the main, let's just do an if block, show user navbar, and we just say user navbar. We also include the auth model is equal to $, user store, or the data.auth model. We're going to say on close show user nav bar is equal to false. So now that's it. Let's go over to the dev server and let's see how it looks. All right. So the reason that it's not uploading is because if we go over to the PocketBase and we go to the settings, edit collection, you can see that the photo is named avatar and not photo. So let's just rename this to photo. And this should be fixed. Right here, let's edit profile, update profile. You see, it works. So now you can see we log out and let's log in back to my account. You see, we have our image again. We have the same profile. Alright, so in the previous video, we created the user profile page. But in this video, we're going to actually create the create conversation page, which allows us to create the conversation. So let's get straight into the code. So in the create conversations folder inside the app folder, let's create a new file called plusserver.ts. So before we get into code, open up the terminal, run npm run dev, and also open a new instance of the terminal, open PocketBase, go /PocketBase serve. So you can have the PocketBase instance running, and you can also have the dev server for the Svelte kit running as well. So running the Svelte kit while we're programming allows us to get auto-generated types for our functions. So export const post is going to be of type request handler from $types. So then we're going to do an asynchronous function that's going to take in the locals and the request. Then we're going to get the auth model from the PocketBase. So we're going to say locals.pocketbase.authStore.model. We're going to say not auth model. So if the auth model does not exist, or if the auth model is not a user, we're going to throw in a redirect. So we're going to throw redirect to the sign up page. So 303/sign up. So then we're going to create a try catch block. So now we're going to access the JSON data inside the try block. So we're going to say const JSON data is equal to await request.json. So instead of form data, which we usually do for actual form actions with Svelte kit, we're going to access it with JSON because we're going to have some specific functionality that can't be done with form actions. So we're going to say const selected users is equal to JSON data dot selected users. So selected users. So we're going to validate the selected users. So now once we validated the actual selected users, to make sure that the selected users is an array with the length less than or equal to 4. So we're going to say let validated selected users is a type of user array. We're just going to set the default value to an array that contains the auth model because we actually want the user to be part of the conversation they're creating. So then we're going to say for const item of selected users. So we're going to loop over the selected users that's unvalidated. So we're going to validate each of the items. So validate user item. So we're going to say validated. So we're just going to push the validated item into the validated selected users because we already know that the item is actually a user. But if it's not, we're just going to say throw new error an item in the selected users array was not a user. So let's get out of the for block and let's say let validation string is equal to validated selected users dot reduce. So now we're going to reduce this array of validated selected users into a query so we could check if the users actually exist. So we're going to say previous value and also current user This is going to be a function, and the default value is going to be an empty array. An empty string. And then we're just going to say if the previous value is not null, we're just going to return previous value or ID. Make sure to add these quotes whenever you're validating. So then we're going to say current user.id. So right here, we're going to copy this down, and we're just going to make sure that the ID is equal to the current user.id. So then we're going to create three variables. Let members, no, actually, we're going to get the validation result. So validation result is equal to await locals.pocketbase dot user the user collection. So collection users dot get full list record model and users. So we're going to pass in the generic type, and then we're going to say the filter is equal to the validation string. Let's make sure to import the record model. So now below the validation result, let's say let members is a string array, and let's set it to an empty string, and let's copy this down. This is going to be admins is a string array, and it's also conversation name is equal to just an empty string. So we're going to set this to an empty string. So now for let I, so we're going to loop over the validated users array. So we're going to say let user is equal to validated selected user I, and then we're going to say if not validation result dot find item. So we're going to find the item that equals to user.id. So if the validation result includes one of the validated selected users, if it doesn't, actually, my bad, we're going to throw a new error saying that a user that you provided does not exist. So in this case, we got the fetch call for our validated users, and we saw that one of them doesn't actually exist. So we're going to say that it does not exist. If not, we're going to say members dot push user dot id, and if the index is 0, so that means that the index is 0. No, we don't actually do that. We say if the index is 0, we just set the conversation name to user.name, and if it's not 0, if it's over 0, it's equal to a concatenated string that includes the conversation name, comma, user.name. So now, if we check that the user.id is actually equal to the auth model.id, we push that user to the admins. So we make sure that the only admin is us. Or not us, but the person actually creating this conversation. So we're going to say await locals.pocketbase. So we're going to create the conversation actually. So then let's get the conversations array. The conversations collection. So let's create record model and conversation. Let's import conversation. And then we say create. Let's specify the name is equal to the conversation name. We say messages is equal to an empty array. We say members, and let's give the admins array. And now we return a JSON object saying that the success is equal to true. So now let's catch the error. So if the error is an instance of error, that means if we actually provided some text informing us of what went wrong, we're going to throw the error with the actual error message. So we're going to give the code of 400 saying that it's internally a server error, or we're just going to give the same code, but we're just going to say unknown error occurred when creating conversation. And now that's it. No, we gotta say messages. And now let's close this file and let's open up the page.svelte file inside the same folder. Let's create a module script with the lang set to ts. So context module and also lang set to ts. So the module context allows us to declare variables and types without actually needing to re-render them or declare them inside the component. So this basically lives outside of the component, but we say it's inside the component because it's part of the component logic. Let's create a type right here. We say type page events is a type of close, and we say undefined. So the only events that are going to be in this page are going to be used by this page right here. So you see, if we scroll down, you see the create conversation page. You can see that we have an on close. This is basically listening to this page events right here. So let's close this file. And let's create the event dispatcher. So event dispatcher is equal to create event dispatcher from Svelte. And we're going to pass in the generic type of page events. And we're just going to call it. So whenever we want to call this close function, we just say event dispatcher, and we just say close. And you see, it works. So now let's create 5 variables. So we're going to say let search text is equal to an empty string. Copy this down 4 more times. This is going to be search results, selected users, and then show selected. And this is going to be submitting. So this is going to be a Boolean by default set to false. This is also going to be a Boolean set to false, mean empty array, but this is going to be typed specifically as a user array. This is also going to be a user array. And now let's create 2 reactive declarations. So the first one is going to be if the selected users.length is equal to 0. So if we have no results for the user selected, we say show selected is equal to false. But right now I can't really explain it because it's pretty arbitrary and I don't really know how to explain it in the context of the logic. So let's just go straight into the next reactive function, next reactive declaration. So then we're going to get the PB store. And we say if the PB store, and we're in the browser, so double ampersand browser. If the search text is equal to an empty array, we say search results is equal to an empty array. Else, we say let local search text. So we're going to get a temporary variable called local search text to make sure that when we actually update the selected users or the search results, we're actually in sync and we're actually updating when we're supposed to. So I'll explain this later in more context when we write the code. So we're going to get access to the user's collection. So user's collection is equal to ampersand PB dot collection users. So now we're going to say use collection dot get full list, and we're going to say filter name must be similar, or at least must contain this search text in the beginning. So we're going to add this right here. So basically, whatever the search text is, the name must contain the search text in the beginning, because this %sign doesn't allow us to have the search text in any other place that's not the beginning. So now we're going to create another validation right here. Let's make sure to wait. Let's make sure to add 2 ampersands. I'm going to say ID does not equal. Make sure to have it in quotes. And let's say the data.authModel.id. So we're going to make sure that we don't actually query ourselves. Then we get the results. And then we say let validated results is a user's array. User array. And now let's loop over the item. So for const item of results. So if validate user item, I'm going to say validated results dot push item. So we're going to push the item if it's actually user, else we're going to have an early return and make sure that this function doesn't run. So now we're going to say if the search text is actually equal to local search text, you see that the local search text has to be equal to the search text for us to update. So we're going to say search results, validated results. Oh wait, let's set this to search text. Let's make sure to rename this to submitting. So now below this reactive statement, let's create a new function called handle click user. So we're going to take in the user as a parameter. And we're going to check if the user that they passed in is part of the selected users array. So dot includes user. So now if selected users dot length is equal to 4 and not users selected, return. So we're basically saying if the selected users dot length is equal to 4 and this user selected is not actually part of the selected users, we're just going to return, because we can't actually add more users to this array because it'll surpass the limit for the conversation. So we're going to say user selected. So if it is selected, we're just going to remove it from the selected users array. Selected users is equal to the filtered version of the selected users that says that the items must not have the user.id. And we're also going to do an early return. So by default, we're just going to say selected users is equal to selected users dot. So we're going to push the user onto the selected user array. So we're going to say function handle selection click. So now I'm going to check if the users dot length is equal to 0. And we're just going to do an early return. So we're going to say show selected is equal to not show selected. So by default, the behavior is going to be that we choose some users, and if we have some users chosen, we can be able to toggle the show selected to be able to view our selected users. But if we don't actually have any users selected, we can't show the selection. So now below this function, let's create an asynchronous function. Async function handle submit. If not, so we're going to make sure that the selected users dot length is between 1 and 4. So selected user dot length is less than 5 and also greater than 0. So if they don't fall into this category, we're going to do an early return. So we're going to set the submitting to true. So let's create a try catch block. So in the catch block, let's do submitting is equal to false, and we're going to do an early return. So in the try block, we're going to access the result from a fetch function we're going to do to our post function that we created earlier. So we're going to do await fetch / create conversation, and we're going to do a method of post, and we're going to do a body json.stringify, an object that contains our selected users. Because the selected users is an array, I found that it was pretty buggy when I would send the array as a JSON stringified, so I actually just passed it in through the object. So now we're going to get the JSON version. No, we're actually going to validate to make sure that the result is okay. So if not result okay, we're going to do an early return. No, actually, if the result is not okay, we're going to get the message await result.json if type of message is equal to a string, we throw a new error that says the message, else throw a new error that's saying unknown error occurred when creating conversation. So we're gonna get the actual message for the error if the result is not okay, and we're gonna check if the message is actually a string or not. And if it's not, we're just gonna pass in a default string that we create. So now we check if the conversation page is a modal or not. And the difference between modal and not is right here. We go to layout and you can see that we pass in the is modal set to true. So then if it's not a modal, we just go to slash, we go to the home page. And if it is true, we call the event dispatcher saying to close the modal. So then in the markup, we're going to create an app container div. Now let's make sure this is a class. And we're going to pass in a conditional variable. So this is going to contain a header, a main, and also a footer. Make sure to have some indentation between these. And then we're going to create a headings div, which contains an h1 that says create a conversation, and also an if block saying that if we are a modal, it's going to show a button with the class of close button, and on click, we're just going to say event dispatcher close. And by default, this is going to contain an icon. So iOS, close circle. So now let's import it right now. So now below this headings, we're going to create a nav that contains an input, which we're going to bind the value of our search text to. No, we're not going to bind search result. We're going to bind search text. And we're also going to add a placeholder that says search by names or email. So we're going to create as if block saying that if the selected users dot length, we're going to show the button allowing us to toggle the show selection. So we're going to say show selected is hide or show selection. So by default, if the show selection is true, we're going to say hide selection. And if not, we're going to show selection. So we're going to say a transition of fade. I'm going to give a custom duration of 150 milliseconds. And we're going to say on click, handle selection click. So now in the main, let's create a if block. So if the search results are none, length is equal to 0, and not show results, show selected, we're going to say dot no user found, and we're going to say no users found, search for them. So then below the as if block, we're going to create an as each block, So we're going to loop over the selected users or the actual results. So if we do show the selection, we only loop over the selected users. Or if we don't have this show selected toggled, we just filter through the search items, search results, and we're going to represent this as a user. So inside of this, let's create a constant at const user selected. So usually in SvelteKit, we can create constants inside the markdown to alleviate some of the redundant code that we have inside our blocks. So I found that I was always using this exact same function around this each block. So I managed to just store it inside a constant that updates every time the parent block updates. So you can see that we keep a reference to see if the user is actually selected. And is up to date with our current state inside the actual application. So now we're going to create a div that says list item. And we're going to create class selected, user selected. You can see that this is the first time it pops up. And we're also going to show a transition of fade of duration 150. And we're going to do on click handle click user. So this whole list item will be an event listener for the on click. So if we do click, we just pass in the user. So let's make sure to take off some of the accessibility errors, because we're not going through accessibility because it's not a course for that. So inside of the list item, let's create a div with the class of user information. And inside of this, let's create a user image class, a user image div with an s if else block saying if the user.photo exists and it doesn't have a length of 0. So user.photo.length is greater than 0 and the PB store exists. We say img and the source will be $pb dot files dot get URL user dot photo, and the alt will just be the user dot name. So if the user does not have a photo, or at least a valid photo, we're just going to show a user circle. So let's import this icon right now. So now below the user image, let's create two divs, one with the class of username and one with the class of user email. So the first one will have user.name as the content, and the second one will have user.email as the content. Below the user information div, let's create a button with the class, with a conditional class of remove set to user selected. You can see that we aren't redundantly calling this user selected function. We're actually reusing it all over the place. So then we're going to say on click, we're going to add the stop propagation flag, and we're also going to say handle click user. So in here we're going to say we're going to give an icon, so dot icon as if else user selected. You can see that multiple times. So we're going to say IOMD close. So if it is selected, if it's not actually, we say IOMD add. So these are very ambiguous names, but you'll see when we get inside the actual testing visually. So now below the icon, let's create a paragraph with a ternary set to the user selected. So if the user is selected, we say remove, and if the user is not selected, we say add. So now below the list item, we create a HR. So HR is basically just a divider element for the web. So in the footer, this is going to be relatively simple. Just a P saying that selected users.length, and also selected users.length is equal to 1. And if it is equal to 1, we're going to say person or people. So you can see that if it's 0, we're going to say 0 people. If it's 1, we're going to say 1 person. And if it's more than 1, we're going to say, for example, 3 people. So now below this P, let's create a button, and it's going to be disabled if the selected users.length is equal to 0, or if we're already submitting the form. So we're going to say continue, and on click, we're going to say handle submit. So now let's go over to the GitHub in the link in the description. So you can see once we open up the link in the description, go over to the source tab, go over to the routes folder, app, create conversation, page.svelte, and let's copy the styles. We're not really going to get into the styles in this video because that's not really what's important for this tutorial. What's important is looking at the logic and how to build an actual functioning application with a functioning backend, front end that looks good. So now once you pasted it in, let's make sure to fix this error. We're going to say handle user click user. And by default, we're going to say this is selected. So now once that's done, you can close this file and let's open up the dev server. Now you can see from the previous video, we actually created the account information. And you can see we could search for people and we could open up this modal. But you can see that the actual route gets updated. And if we refresh, you can see it's full screen. If you go back, you can see it's a modal. And also the modal is responsive with the user screen being less than 700 pixels. You see? We can do like this. But right now, if we go over to the PocketBase admin UI, you see we only have one user. So let's go over to a new tab in Chrome or a new browser to see if we can create a new user. So let's open up the local host inside of Chrome or a new browser. So let's create a new account. So right here we already have test. So let's just say Danny at email.com, and let's just specify a random password. So let's sign up, and you see we're logged in. I want to customize Danny a little bit. Wait, let's refresh. I want to customize Danny a little bit. Let's update the profile. So just to be special, let's make it a GIF so you can see it's a GIF. And if we go over to the home right here, we create a conversation. Let's close this. Let's create a conversation. We search our name. You see it pops up with the actual information. So now you see that we could just show selection and hide selection. But if there was more users, we could actually see the functionality. But for now, I'm not going to create a bunch of users just to show you how it works. We're going to create a conversation with one user. So we could actively remove and add the user to the conversation. But you can see with our search functionality, D works, but not Annie. Even though this does technically contain A, N, and I inside that order. It's just that it has to start with DA or actually have DA and I. So let's add this. Let's continue. And we created the conversation. Alright, so in the previous video, we created the create conversation page. And in this video, we're just going to create the view for the messages page, or actually for the conversation page. So let's get straight into the code. In this tutorial, I'll create two components. One of them is named messages container.svelte, and the other one is named message input container.svelte. So now let's remove this file and let's just open the message container.svelte. And before we do anything, let's open up the terminal and let's run npm run dev. And let's also open up another terminal, open PocketBase, and run /PocketBase serve. Now close the terminal. And now let's create a script with the lang property set to TS. And now let's export. Let's have a property called auth model, which is going to be a user. And then let's export another property, which is going to be a conversation. And then we're going to create two variables, one called scroll view, which is just going to be a reference to the scroll view. And the reason we keep a reference to scroll view is because whenever we send a message, we want to scroll down to see the message for a user. So we're also going to create another variable called show remove button is string or undefined. And this is basically when you hover a button, which button do you show the delete button for? And that's the variable for it. And now let's create a reactive statement. Message groups is equal to conversation and. So basically the message groups is just whenever a user sends more than one message at once or like following each other, then that's called a message group. So if they send 3 messages back to back, that's a message group. So messages dot slice dot reverse dot reduce, and there's gonna be a message array. Sure to import the message. Then we're just gonna say previous value and current value. And now for the default value, it's just gonna be an empty array. So now we say if the previous value dot length is equal to 0, that means if is the first one in the state, we just return an array with array inside, and the array inside has the current value inside of it. So then if we're not in the first one, we say current group index is equal to previous value dot length minus 1 const current message index is equal to previous value current group index dot length minus 1. And now we're going to get a reference to the message. So const message is equal to previous value current message index and also current group index. No, wait. Current message index and then current group index. So now we say if the message of the user, so if the user ID is equal to the same one of the current value, so current value dot user ID. So if they have the same author, we're just gonna say previous value current group index dot push current value. Else we just say previous value dot push an array with the current value inside. So we just return the previous value. So then below is the reactive statement. Let's create another reactive statement. We say if message groups and scroll view, we use the tick function to make sure we get a frame for animation, because if we don't, the actual scrolling will not work. So then we get the tick, and then we also need to check it again. So if message groups and scroll view, then we say scroll view dot scroll to, and then we say top is equal to scroll view dot height, no, scroll height. And then we also say behavior is smooth. So you can see we're getting a reference to the message groups and the scroll view. So whenever the message groups update, we get a tick, and then we check it again, and then we just scroll to the bottom. So then let's do it on mount, and we're saying if the scroll view is not null, we say scroll view dot scroll to, the same thing, top scroll view dot scroll height. But we're not going to give it any smooth behavior because we want it to be instantaneous. So then in the markup, let's create a if block. It's going to be a reference to the PB store. So we're going to make sure that the PB store actually has a value in it. So we're going to create a section with a class of messages container, and we're going to bind this to the scroll view. So let's create a each block inside of this section, saying that the message groups and the item is going to be message group. So let's get a constant at const message user, so we get a reference to the current user of the actual message group, message group 0 dot user ID. So then let's create a message group div. So inside the message group, we create a if block, And then we say message group 0.user ID does not equal to auth model.id. So if this user is not actually us, we create a div with the message image, then we create an SF else block. So you can see that we're checking to see if we're actually the user, and if we're not, we show the image of the user alongside with the message. So let's actually create the logic. So then we say message user. We got to make sure the message user is actually valid. And then we say message user dot photo. So we're going to make sure that they actually have a photo. We're going to create an image. $pb dot files dot get URL message user. And for the alt, we just say message user dot name. And we also got to say message user dot photo inside the get URL method. So then, if they don't actually have a valid photo, we create an icon div that contains the FA user circle. So let's import it right now. So now, below this if, we create a user messages container, and we create a if block message user. So we got to make sure that the message user is not null, and that the message user dot ID does not equal to auth model dot ID. So we make sure that it's not actually the user. So we create a span for the class of name. Inside here we say message user dot name or unknown name. So let's create as each block. And here we're gonna loop over the message group to actually see the real messages. So in here, let's do message container, and it's gonna be class primary message dot user ID is equal to auth model dot ID. So if the message is actually sent by us, we're gonna show that it is a primary message. So we say on mouse enter. There's gonna be a function that says show remove button is equal to message dot ID, and then on mouse leave. Let's make sure to remove this. We're gonna make sure that show remove button is equal to undefined. So inside of this div, we're gonna create an as if block, checking if the message.user ID is equal to ours. So if message.user ID is equal to auth model.id and show remove button is equal to message.id. We're just gonna show a form with the action set to at page.url.path name. Let's import the page store. Now let's make sure to take off this accessibility error. So the action is going to be to a form that we're going to create in the next episode, the remove message form. So in here, we're going to create a method of post, a transition of fly with an X property set to 20 and duration set to 150. And also, we're going to use enhance. So now I'm going to create an input with a type of hidden, and the name is just going to be message ID, and the value is going to be a message.id. So we're going to create a button with an icon that says IO MD trash. Let's import it right now. So now below this if block, let's create a message div. So right here, we're going to do it as if block. Say message dot content type is equal to image. Then we got to say else. Then let's create an image with the source set to the message content. So we're going to do $pb dot files dot get URL conversation and then message dot content, and the alt is going to be the message dot content. So for the span, we're just going to say message dot content, because if it's not an image, it's actually just a text, so we just display it in a span. So now below this, we create another span with a class of message date. And then inside here, we're going to create a new date with the message dot created on it. Dot to locale time string with an empty array. And we just say the hour is 2-digit and that the minute is also 2-digit. So you see that we're actually getting the time of the message created and we're converting it just to an hour and minute. So now below the message div, let's get this and let's copy and paste it down like so. So then right here, we're going to say not, and we're also going to say if we are an admin, so conversation.admins.includes auth model.id, and we're just going to show this, and this is going to be -20. And that's also going to be IOMD trash. So now let's go over to GitHub to get the styles for the actual page. So now once you have it open, just go over here, copy and paste, and that should be all. So now we could close this file. So now let's go to the message input container. Let's create a script with the lang property set to TS, and then we're going to create a few inputs. So message input is going to be an empty string, let conversation, just conversation or undefined, let image send open is equal to false. We're also going to let submitting image is equal to false. And then we're going to create a reactive statement saying that if the converse like so, and then let's just go like this. So inside here, we're just going to create a constant called conversation found is equal to $conversation store dot find item, and then item dot id has to equal to $page dot params dot conversation id. So in here, let's just do import the conversation, and that's really all the logic for this component. So in here, let's just create a section with a class of message. So section dot message input container, and here let's create a div with the class of image send container, and then we say if submitting image or image send open. So we say form with a class of image send. It has an action set to the $page dot URL dot path name !/ send image. So all of these form actions we're going to create in the next video. So here the method is going to be post, and we're also going to do enc type of multi-part form data because we want to send messages, and below everything we're just going to use enhance is equal to a function, and then we say submitting image is equal to true, or return. And once we finish submitting the image, we just say submitting image is equal to false, and also image send open is equal to true. I mean false. So now in this form, we're just going to create a P that says choose a file. Oh, and I forgot. We're going to create a transition of fly. So right here, we're going to set the Y to 20 and the duration to 150. So now we're going to choose a file. We're going to say input with the name of photo. So right here, let's create this. And let's remove this ID property. And we're going to say that we accept the same image types that we created in the first episode. I mean, the second one, which is going to be image.jpg, image/png, image/svg, and also image/gif and image/webp. So now here we're going to say button disabled. We're going to say submit, and we're going to disable this button if the submitting image is equal to true. So right here you see that we choose a file. We actually get the file, and we make sure that the submitting image is disabled if we're actually submitting another image, because we don't want to submit multiple images in the same form. So now below this if block, we're going to create a button with the class of add button. And if we click this button, we're just going to say image send open is equal to not image send open. So now let's have a div with the icon class dot icon. We're going to say class open is equal to image send open. And right here, if the image is sent open, we're just going to twist it a few times to make it show an X, because this icon is going to be a plus icon. You're going to see there's going to be IOMD add. So let's import this icon. So now let's go right here and let's create a form below this button. Form post with the method of post, and this is going to be, the action is going to be to the $page dot URL dot path name !/ send message. And remember, all of these form actions we're going to create in the next video. So then the class for this form is going to be class message form, and we're also going to make sure to use the use enhance. And this use enhance is just going to return an empty function that's just going to say message input is equal to nothing. So let's create an input with a type of text, the name of message, and also the class of message input. So then let's remove this ID. So we're going to say placeholder is equal to type a message, and also we're going to bind the value to the message input. And the reason we bind the value to the message input is because we don't actually want to edit it. We just want to make sure that it's actually valid. It's actually a valid input. So we say button disabled, and we're going to mark it as disabled if the message input is equal to an empty string. So we're just going to say this is the iOS send icon. So let's import it right now. Now I was looking through the code and I found out that this conversation is actually a redundant variable and we don't need it. So let's remove this. So we just need these three. And let's remove this right here. So now let's go over to GitHub at message input container.svelte. Let's copy the styles. And then we're gonna paste them into the container. Oh, I found the error. Right here you see this form. Let's move it below this div. So now we can close this message. We can close this component. And then in the conversations folder, let's create a new folder. And we're going to say bracket, bracket, conversation underscore ID. Let's just go and let's create a new file called pluspage.svelte. And here, let's create a script with the language property set to TS. So let's create two properties. One is the page data. And then we're going to also let export let form is equal to action data, because we're going to take. So then we're going to say let show conversation settings is equal to false. And we're also going to create a conversation variable. Const conversation is equal to the conversation or undefined. Then we're just going to say reactive declaration saying that if the conversation, just to get the autocomplete on the action data, let's go over to the folder of the conversation ID and let's create a new file called pluspage.server.ts. And here, let's just export const actions is equal to an empty object. Let's close this and let's import the type. So then if the conversation store is actually true, or not true, not null, found is equal to $conversation store dot find. And we just say item dot ID has to equal to the $page, to the page store dot params dot conversation ID. And then we just set the conversation to conversation found. So you see, we loop through the conversation store and we find the conversation, and we set the conversation to the conversation that's found. So now we say Svelte head, and then we create an as if block, no, an as if else. So then if we're in the browser, we say that the conversation, we create another as if else block, and then we say if we ask if the conversation is actually not null. So let's create a title for each one of these. And this is actually going to be inside of this one. And right here, if we're not in the browser, we just say loading conversation. And if the conversation is null but we're inside the browser, we say no conversation found. And if the conversation is found, we just show the conversation name. So now, right here, we're going to say Svelte document. And we're going to add an event listener to the Svelte document. We're going to say on key down. We're going to have an event. We're going to say if we show the conversation settings. And inside this, we say if event.key is equal to escape. We say event.prevent default. And we close the conversation settings. So we say show conversation settings is equal to false. So now inside of here, let's create an as if block. So then we check if the conversation is actually true and that the PB store is actually not null. To import it manually like this. So next to the conversation store, we can say PB. So now if the conversation is not null and the inside here, let's create an else. And inside the else, we actually say that the conversation and the PB store are null. One of them is null. So the section is going to be no conversation found. And inside here, we're going to create a span with an A. So the span is going to say no conversation found, and also the href A. you're just gonna show or link to the slash so we could go home. So inside of the if block, we create a div with the class of conversation container. So inside here, we create a header. We create a header that contains a section with the class of conversation information. And inside here, we also have a nav next to the the section. So inside of the section, we created a with the href set to slash dot backlink. So inside of here, we say div dot icon, and we're gonna add the MD arrow back icon. So let's input that right now. So now below this anchor tag, let's create a div with the conversation image, and we're gonna say as if else block. Now we check if the conversation photo is actually not null and that the conversation photo dot length is greater than 0. So we make sure to check it. So here we could say like this. So now we say inside of the if block, we say image with the source set to $pb dot get file URL conversation and the conversation photo. And the alternative is going to be just the conversation name. So then the else, we just say dot icon. And inside here, we just say MD group. Let's input this right now. So now below this div, let's create a H1 that says conversation that has the content of conversation dot name. So you can see this is only going to show for mobile, but inherently on all devices we're going to show the photo of the conversation, and if the conversation photo does not exist, we're just going to show an MD group, a default icon, and we're just going to show the conversation name inside the header. So inside the nav, we're going to have a button with the class of settings, and when we click this button, we want to say that we show conversation settings is equal to true. And then we also say we create an icon div. We say IOMD settings. So now below this header, we're going to add the messages container. And below this, we say messages, message input container. In here, let's add the property. So the auth model is going to be data.auth model. And we're also going to show the conversation. And now, let's go over to GitHub. Let's go to routes, app, conversations, right here, and go to plus page of Svelte. And let's do style. Let's import this. Let's copy this. And let's paste it. Let's make sure to add this right here. Oh, and let's also fix this typo. So now, once you do this, you can close this file and you can open up localhost. So now you can see that we have the image right here, the group, because we don't actually have the message input. So you can see we could actually have the choose a file form. We'd also type a message. We could send it, but it's not going to work because we don't actually have the form action. All right, so in the previous video, we created the actual view for the conversation page. In this video, we're going to create the actual logic for the conversation page. The logic is just going to be the form actions for the different components in the page. So let's get straight into it. In the previous video, we created this file, the plus page.server.ts. So open it up. You can see, if you followed the previous video, you have an export const actions and it's just going to be an empty object. So let's go inside here and let's create 3 functions, one called send message. They're all going to be asynchronous and they're going to take locales, request, and params. So that's the first one. The second one is going to be send image. And the third one is going to be remove message. All right, once you created these 3 functions, open up the first one and let's get access to the auth model. So we say auth model is equal to locales.pocketbase.authstore.model. And then we have to check if the auth model is actually valid. So we say validate user auth model. So if it's not valid, we just throw redirect 303 to /sign up. So let's import the redirect function right here. And then let's get access to the form data. So you go to await request dot form data. And then const message content is equal to form data dot get message. So you can see we validate to see if the user is actually authenticated, and we get access to the form data, and then we get access to the string that they send as a message. So let's create a try catch block, and inside let's actually verify to see if the message content is actually valid. So then once you validated it, let's get access to the actual conversation. So conversation collection, so let's just scroll down. Conversation collection is equal to locals.pocketbase.collection, and then we just say conversation as the collection name. So then we get access to the actual conversation, saying that it's going to be a type of record model and conversation or undefined. So then we just say await conversation collection dot get one, and then we say params dot conversation dot id. So you can see we get access to the conversations collection. Then we query it to see if we actually find one with the actual conversation ID. And if we don't, we just throw a new error. So if not conversation, throw new error, conversation not found. So then let's create the message. So const message is going to be a type of message. So then the content is going to be message content. Content type is going to be message. User ID is a type of auth model.id. User ID is also going to be a new date.toISO string. ID is going to be type of UUID. So let's go up to the top of this file and let's import v4 as UUID from UUID. Oh, let's make sure the colon. And then we say created. No, wait, this is created, not user ID. So then let's check to see if the conversation messages is not past the maximum. So we say messages dot length is greater than or equal to, wait, let's say greater than or equal to 50. So we say conversation dot messages is equal to an array message dot 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 conversation dot messages dot slice 0 through 50. Else we say conversation dot messages is equal to message and dot 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 conversation dot messages. So you see, we check to see if they surpass the limit on the conversation messages, and if they did, we just remove the extra messages to make sure that they don't surpass it. But if they don't, we simply just concatenate these messages with the new message. So then finally, once we have access to the final messages or the final conversation, we say locals.PocketBase admin, because this is admin function. We say collection conversations dot update, and then we also give the conversation dot ID, and then we give them an object saying messages is a type of, no, it's actually gonna be conversation dot messages. So then in the catch block, we say console.log error, and then we say if error is an instance of error, we just return the error as the text. So we just return error dot message. So then below we just say return error is unknown, error occurred when sending message. And then by default, we're just gonna throw redirect back to the $params dot conversation underscore ID. So basically, we just return them back to the same page they came from. So you see, we validate the message, and let's make sure to fix this typo right here. We get access to the conversation, we check if it actually exists, and then we just update it. Oh, and let's make sure to fix this. This is not. So then, below in the send image, let's open this function up and let's copy everything from here because this is very similar. Let's copy this down and let's paste. So instead of getting the message content, we remove this and we say photo, and we get the photo, and then we make sure that the photo is an instance of photo. So then we modify this message saying that the result dot message photos dot result dot message photos dot length. We say result, and now let's get the result right here. So after we validate the conversation, we say const result is equal. So let's just copy this down. And then we just update the conversation that we have. So we say update conversation dot ID. Let's name this as result. And we're going to provide that the message photos is just going to add the message. So then let's verify to see. Throw. So you can see we update the actual collection to include the photo as part of the images, and then we get the message. Wait, let's make sure we return this as result. So we upload the image, and then we just send it as a message. We send the content as the link for the message photo. So right here you see the conversation collection. We're referencing the conversation collection from the client PocketBase and not from the admin PocketBase. So we gotta say locals.PocketBase admin.update, and then we also get a reference to the collection conversations. Fix this typo right here. And let's make sure to change this to image. Let's make sure to fix this typo right here and right here. So then let's copy this and let's paste this down into the remove message function. And you can see that instead of getting the photo, we say message ID, and then we also say message dash ID. So then let's verify to see if the message ID is actually valid. So then below this, we just remove the result, right? And then we check to see let is admin to see if conversation.admins.includes auth model.id. So we check if the user is admin. And then let's remove this. So we say let message found is equal to conversation dot messages dot find. Then we say msg dot id is equal to message id. So then we make sure to find the message, and then we say const user does not own message is equal to not parentheses message found and message found dot user id does not equal to auth model dot id. So then we see we find the message, and then we also check if the user has ownership of the message, and if they don't, they could delete it only if they are admin. So then we say if not is admin and user does not own message. So if they don't have ownership over the message and they're not admin, we throw a new error saying that they do not have permission. So user does not have permission to remove this message. And so you see, let's do some more checks for this to see if this is an image. So we say let is image is equal to false, and then we say let image URL is equal to an empty string. And the reason we're doing this check is to see, because if we delete a message and we actually delete the real message in the JSON, we don't actually delete the image from the collection. We have to delete the image and then the message. So then let's go over here and we say let messages is equal to conversation dot messages dot filter. So we say msg const equals is equal to msg dot id does not equal to message id. So if it does not equal, we say is image is equal to msg dot content type is equal to image, and then we say image URL is equal to msg dot content. So then we just return equals. Oh, let's make sure to fix this typo right here. So then we make sure to see if the message is actually equal, and if it's not equal, we see no, if it is equal, we mark the is image to make sure that the content type is equal to image, and we say image URL is equal to content type. No, this is gonna be content. Oh, let's make sure to fix this typo. So then let's do an if statement. We say if is image. So let's wrap this around here. And then we update not just the images, but we also say that the message underscore photos, and we add a minus at the end. Make sure to add the minus to make sure that PocketBase knows that we're trying to remove this message or this image actually. So we say message image, message photos minus, and then we provide an array saying message URL. So then else, if it's not an image, we just update the messages. So we just go like this. So then let's go over here. And let's say if it is an instance of error, we return fail with a code of 500. That the error is error dot message. And then we also wrap this around parentheses and we say 500 on the beginning. First of all, we wrap this around fail and we say 500. And that's it. So once you're done with this code, go over to say like this. So once you're done with this code, let's do npm run dev in the terminal. And let's also run, and let's run / PocketBase serve. So then open up localhost. So you can see we already have a message open. And if we type a message, let's say test, it's sent. And you see it opens up the trash can. So let's add test 1, test 2, test 3. So if we open up Chrome, so you see, if we go over here, you can see I see the messages. And I also see my point of view. So if we go over to PocketBase, let's go. Now you can see if we go to conversation, we have the actual message JSON right here. So now let's upload a photo. Let's submit. And you can see it's uploaded. And if we go over here, it's uploaded too. What the? And you can see I could delete it from my screen, but he can't delete mine's. Look, if I delete it, you see it goes away. And if I delete mine's, like so, I could delete all my messages. Alright, so in the previous video, we created the logic for the actual conversation page. In this video, we'll create the view for the settings page. So before we get into the code, open up the terminal and run npm run dev and open up a new terminal instance. Open the PocketBase folder, go and run /PocketBase serve, and then close the terminal, and then we can get straight into the code. So in the components folder, let's create a new file called settings photo change view.svelte. So then we create a script with the context property set to module, and we also set the lang property set to ts right here, and then we just say type component events is equal to, and then we're gonna set one component event, which is gonna be the close, and it's just gonna map to an undefined. So now we create a script, lang set to ts on the script, and then we say export let conversation is of type of conversation. And then we say export let auth model is of type user. And then we say dispatch event. So we create an event dispatcher is equal to create event dispatcher. And we're going to give it the default type of component events. So then that's all we're going to do for our JavaScript. Then inside the markup, let's create a section. Inside, let's create a div with an h1 element inside that says choose an image. Then we're going to say form with the action set to $page. So import the page store. Then we say $page dot URL dot path name / edit conversation photo. And then we give it a method of post. We also give it enc type multipart form data. And then we say use enhance. So let's import the enhance function from Svelte. So when we say use enhance, we return and we dispatch event close. So then you see that we create a form, and once we submit it, we close this function. We close this component, I mean. So inside of here, we have an input form. So we say input, which is going to be a type of file. And the name is going to be photo, and it's going to have no ID. And it's going to accept JPGs, PNGs, image / JPG, image / PNG, image / SVG, image / GIF, image / WebP. And below this, we just create a button that just says submit. So then below this form, we create a button with the class of cancel, and it's going to say back. And we're going to say on click, dispatch event to close. So you see that we could cancel the form or we could submit it, but both of them will close the actual component. So then let's go over to GitHub to get the styles. So once you open up the GitHub link, go to the source folder, open up the lib folder, components. You go here and then you go settings, photo change view, and you just copy the styles. So copy this right there. Oh, and this has to be below the div. So now close this file. And then inside the components folder, let's create a new file called settings member view.svelte. And there's going to be a script This is going to have a script with the context to module and the lang property set to TS. And it's going to have a component events type. And it's going to map to 1, which is going to be a close function. So it's going to be undefined. And then we're going to say script with the language property set to TS. So then let's create a property on this component saying export let conversation. This conversation is a type of conversation. And we say export let auth model is going to be a type of user. So then we're going to create an event dispatcher. So dispatch event is equal to create event dispatcher. And we're going to give it the component events. So we say let adding members is equal to false. Let search text is equal to an empty string. Let search results is a type of user array. And we're going to copy the search results down, and we're going to say selected users. Then we say let show selected is equal to false. And we're also going to say let submitting is equal to false as well. So this logic is actually so similar to the create conversation page that we could go over to here. We could go here and we could copy this. And we could copy this and we could paste it right here. Let's make sure to rename this component into settings members view. So let's make sure to import all of the things that we need to import. So let's import the PB store, browser, validate user. And let's make sure it's not data.auth model, just normal auth model. And right here, we don't even need this. We just need to, we're just going to set the adding members to false. All right. So in the markup, we're going to create a S if block, validating to see if the PB store is actually true. Or I mean valid. And then inside here, we create another S if block, seeing if we're actually adding the members. So in here, we could see if we could copy and paste some of the code so we don't have to type that much. So then let's get this nav right here, and let's copy and paste this over here. And then below this, let's get this main. Let's copy this and let's paste it below here. Let's make sure to import the transition fade. Let's import these icons right now. To import these icons, we could literally just go here, copy the imports, and paste them in right here. So then inside this main, we just rename this. So let's rename symbol to section, and we give the section the class of users. So then right here above the users collection, we paste this in, type in this, and here we're also going to add an extra line for the validation. So we're going to say and $, conversation, member query. So you can see in this member query, we make sure that we get all of the IDs for the users that is in the members. So then in the try block, let's just remove the result, and we say that the result, instead of passing in the body, is just going to be a variable that we're going to create right now called form data. And form data, we're going to say let form data is equal to new form data. And then we're going to say form data dot append members, and also JSON dot stringify selected users dot map selected users dot map ID. So then we're going to append the members to all of the selected users, and we're just going to map it JSON to a JSON array of IDs. And instead of saying create conversation, we're going to say $, have this as a template string, and it's going to be $, and we're going to concatenate the page.url.path name !/ add members, and this function we're going to create it in the next video. Let's make sure to import the page. Let's say $page. So right here, for this input, let's remove the placeholder. And for this button, we're going to give it a class of user button. And this button is also going to have a class of user button. Below this section, we're going to create a div with a class of actions. And inside, we're going to have a button with the class of add. And we're going to say disabled is equal to submitting or selected users dot length is equal to 0. And on click, we're just going to set it to the handle submit function. I'm going to say add selected users dot length members. Below this, we're going to have a button with a class of cancel. I'm going to say disabled is equal to submitting. So if we're submitting, this class is disabled. So on click is going to be a function that sets the adding members to false. And we're going to say cancel. I'm going to say submitting. So then below this div, let's create an else. I'm going to say section dot editing members. So it's going to have a class of editing members. And inside here, let's create a div with the members class. And we're going to create a each block. So then we're going to loop over the conversation dot members dot filter. And then we're going to say member. So we're going to make sure that the member is not us. So auth model.id as user ID. So we're going to say $const user is equal to $cached users user ID. So if, as if, so an as if block, if the user exists. So if the user exists, we create a div with the class of member container that also has a HR next to it. So inside here, we create two elements, a member div and also a form with the method of post. Inside this member, we create a photo div. Inside of here, we create a as if block, as if else actually. So if the user dot photo, we just say image, and then the source is going to be $pb dot get file URL user and user dot photo, and then alt is going to be just a string. So in here we're going to say fa user circle, and then below the photo we're just going to say dot member information, and here we're going to create two spans, one with the class of name and one with the class of email for the name one and the email for the email one. Make sure I have it like this. And then in the form, we're going to create an action to the page, $page dot URL dot path name question mark slash remove member. So it's going to be a method of post. And we're also going to just set the use enhance. So then we're going to add an input that's going to be a hidden input. And the name is going to be user ID. We're just going to pass our user ID as a hidden input. And then we're going to say button IOMD trash. And let's import the button. Let's import the icon right now. So then let's go back down. And here we could just expand this button. So then below this div right here, we create another class of actions. There's going to be two buttons, button with the class of add and also button with the class of cancel. And we're going to say add and cancel for them respectively. And on click on the add button. So on click, we're just going to say adding members is equal to true. And on click, dispatch event to close. And this is going to be, instead of cancel, we're just going to say back. So then Let's expand this button. Let's expand. Oh, and this button's gonna be we're gonna have a class of remove member. And now we're safe to go to the GitHub page, settings member view.svelte. Let's copy down the styles right here. So then we copy and let's just paste it. Now we can close these two files. And then in the components folder, let's create a new file called conversation settings.svelte. And here we're going to create a script with the context set to module and also the lang property set to TS. And we're going to export type component events is equal to, and we're just going to close, is null. And then we're going to create a script with the lang property set to TS. We're going to have two properties on this component, one called conversation, which is going to be a type of conversation, and one which is going to be user, and we're just going to name it auth model. So this is going to be, so then we're going to create two variables, one called editing members is equal to false, and also one called photo. And then we're going to create an event dispatcher. So dispatch event is equal to create event dispatcher. The template string, so then the custom events is going to be component events. So in here, we're going to create an as if block, checking to see if the PB stores are valid. So in here, we're going to create two constants. One called can leave conversation is equal to not conversation.admins.includes auth model.id and conversation.admins.length. So by default, you can leave the conversation, but if you're an admin and there's less than 2 admins inside the conversation, you cannot leave. So right here, we're going to create another variable called can delete conversation, which is just going to say, is just going to check if we are inside the admins. So let's create a header with an h1 and also a button with the class of close button. So in the h1 we say conversation settings, and for the close button we check the on click, and if the user clicks on the close button we dispatch the close event. So in here we just say iOS close circle. So then let's import the icon right now. So then let's create a else if block. So 3 conditions. So the first one is going to be editing members. So if we're not editing members, we're editing photo, or we're just not doing any of these. So then let's remove this comment. And here we just say settings members view. So then let's import the settings member view. And then we're going to pass in the auth model and the conversation. And then we're going to say on close. We're just going to set the editing member to false. And then we're just going to copy this down to editing members right here. So instead of editing members, it's going to be editing photo. So this is going to be the settings photo change view. And exactly the same thing, but instead of changing the editing members to false, we're going to say editing photo to false. So in the else block, let's create a div with a class of conversation view, conversation actions. So in here, let's create a section with a class of conversation formation that contains a div with a class of conversation image container, which contains a div with the conversation with the class of conversation image. So in here, we create an as if block saying conversation dot photo and conversation dot photo dot length is greater than 0. And then let's create the else block. So if we do have the photo, we say source is equal to $pb dot get file URL conversation and also conversation dot photo. And we're gonna say the alt is gonna be conversation dot name. So if we don't have access to the conversation photo, we're just gonna say a div of icon with the class of icon saying md group. So then let's import the icon right now. So then below the conversation image div, we create a as if block with the conversation dot admins dot includes auth model dot id. And let's fix this error right here. We're gonna say conversation photos, not conversation. So in here we create a button with the class of edit button, and then we say on click. We're gonna say editing. We're gonna set a function that sets the editing photo to true. And here we're gonna say IO create. So let's input that icon right now. So now inside the section, but below this div, we're gonna say as if conversation dot admins dot includes auth model. So in here, we're gonna say a form with a method of post, and we're gonna enhance this form. So use enhance, and the action is just gonna be to the $page dot URL dot path name $/ edit conversation name. So inside of this form, let's have an input with the name set to name, and we set the value equal to station.name, and then we say button change name. Let's make sure to import the page store. So now if we don't include the admin, we create a span with the class of conversation name and also conversation.name inside of that span. So now before the block, let's create a div with the class of conversation members, the span inside of it, and we're just gonna reduce the members array. So members.reduce. So we're gonna say previous, current, and I. So we're gonna say let user found is equal to $cached users dot, and we're gonna say the current dot name. So if not user found and auth model dot id is equal to current, we say user found is equal to you, because look, in our cached users, we don't actually include ourselves as the user. So in this case, we haven't found the user, but it's actually us. So we just say that the user found is us. So if not user found, we just return previous. So now we say if I is equal to 0, return user found, else return a concatenated string with the previous, comma, concatenate with the user found. So by default, we're going to set the default value, the initial value, to an empty string. So below the span, we're going to create an as if block saying conversation.admins.includes auth model.id. And this is going to contain a button with no class at all, just saying that on click, we're just going to set the editing members to true. And inside the text is just going to be edit members. So below the section, let's create another section with the class of danger zone. And let's create a span as the title saying danger zone. And below the danger zone span, let's create a section with the class of danger zone content. Let's create a as if block saying can leave conversation. I want to say form with the action with the method set to post. And then we're going to say page.url.path name question mark slash leave conversation. So inside of here, we're just going to have a button saying leave conversation. So now let's copy this down. And instead of can leave conversation, we're going to say can delete conversation. So it's going to be to the delete conversation function that we're going to create in the next video. And this is going to be delete conversation. And now that we're done with the HTML, we could go over to GitHub, go to the conversation settings component, and copy down the styles. So let's copy and paste. So then let's close this file. And in the plus page.svelte file, right over here below this div that contains everything. So below the conversation container div, we create a as if block. And we say show conversation settings. So if we show the conversation settings, we create a div with the conversation setting class with the transition set to fade, duration 100, and also on click, we're going to say show conversation settings is equal to false. Div, we're going to, inside of this div, we create another div called conversation settings content. And inside of here, content. So then we add an event listener for the click, and then we say stop propagation to make sure that this doesn't get called if we click on the actual container, because it would be very bad experience if just clicking around the settings, you get exited out of the settings. So inside of here, we create a conversation. We add the conversation settings. We add the conversation. We add the auth model, which is going to be of type of data.auth model. And then we get the auth on close function. Then we show conversation settings is equal to false. Fix this typo, we're going to say show conversation settings. And now you can close this file, open the terminal, and let's go over to localhost. So you see we're taken straight to the sign up page. Let's log in with the account we made previously. So just to see which account we made, let's just get this, paste it in. Let's go over to PocketBase. Let's log in. And this was danny@email.com. So we're going to log in with that one. Test. So in here, let's say test Danny. We could go over to the settings, but the things don't work. The actual form actions don't work. So you see that if I sign out, so I log out, and I go to test@email.com. No, wait, we have to log in. Test@email.com, test, and we actually sign in with the admin user for the conversation. We can see the edit members. We could go back, we could add members. But because I don't have extra members, I can't actually see the members if I search for them. Alright, so in the previous video, we created the view for the conversation settings page. But in this video, we'll actually create the action for the logic for the conversation settings page. So let's go over to the code. And before we actually get into any code, open up the terminal, run npm run dev, and on a separate terminal instance, open the PocketBase folder and run /PocketBase serve. And once that's up and running, close the terminal and go to the page.server.ts file in the conversation ID folder. And then we're ready to jump into the code. So then below the send image function, let's just copy the send image function. And let's just paste it down here. And let's just close this right here, send image. So the first function we're gonna create is a leave conversation function. So all these functions are very similar to each other in the fact that they first validate the user, then they get the form data, then they create a try catch block, and then they catch for errors. Essentially, all we're doing is changing up the form data and changing up the action that we're doing. So they're very similar, so we can copy paste sometimes. But for the leave conversation, we're not gonna actually have any photo. We're gonna delete this. So instead of removing it all, we keep the conversation collection. We query this, we check the conversation. But instead of querying the conversation, we close this, we remove this right here, and we take this off again. And then we say const members is equal to conversation.members.filter member. So we're gonna make sure that the member is not actually us. So member does not actually equal to authModel.id. So then below this, we're gonna say if members.length is greater than 2, we're gonna say await locals.PocketBase admin.collection. So we're gonna say conversations.delete, and then we're gonna say conversation.id. And then we're gonna do an early return. So then if it is less than 2, we remove the actual conversation, but if not, we just update it, and instead of updating it with the members, instead of updating with messages, we just say members right there, and that's perfect. Instead of redirecting back to the conversation ID, we just say slash. So then the next function we'll do is the delete conversation function. So let's create it right now. Let's copy down the leave conversation function. Let's close this one, and this one's gonna be delete conversation. So essentially, we're doing very similar things in the fact that we check the conversation, we check the auth model, but instead of checking the members, we do let is admin is equal to conversation.admins.includes auth model.id. So we check if the user is admin, and if they are, so actually if they're not admin, we throw new error saying that the user is not an admin. So then we update it by saying delete conversation, and then we don't pass in any function actually. So the next function we'll do is an edit conversation name function. So let's do that right now. Wait, let's make sure this is an equal sign. And in here, this isn't going to be a delete conversation function. This is going to be a edit conversation name function. Edit conversation name. So then in here, we're going to say const form data is equal to await request dot form data, and then we're going to say const name is equal to form data dot get name. So you can see that if we actually want to edit the conversation, we actually need to get something on the form data. So let's copy the validation right here. So essentially, most of the validation we do is very similar, and theoretically I could have installed a package to do this for me, but I wanted to do this with the least amount of packages as possible to show you guys what it takes to actually build a real service with real functionality. So we edit this and we say, so then we say if conversation.name is equal to the name of that we're submitting, we throw the error that says that the conversation already has this name. So conversation name is the same. So then we check if is admin, and instead of deleting, we say update, and we give it an object, and we just specify the name. And right here below this, we don't actually redirect to slash. We want to redirect to params.conversationID. Oh, and right here in the leave conversation, the delete conversation functions, let's remove the request parameter. So then that's basically everything for this function. The next function we'll create is the remove message function. Oh, actually, we already created it. We're going to do the remove member function. So let's copy down the remove message. So in here, we rename this to remove member. So in the form data, we get the user ID. So we say user ID instead of name. And then we say let redirect home is equal to false. So then let's make sure to do some checks right here. So right here below the is admin, we remove this. If they're not admin, we say user is not an admin. So then we take off this is image check. So let's take this off. And below the is admin check, we just say let members is equal to conversation.members.filter. So we filter to the members. Then we say member does not equal to user ID. So now let's do some checks. We check if members.length is 1, else. And let's also do members. And let's do redirect home if the members length is equal to 1. So we redirect home is equal to true. And instead of updating, we delete this conversation. So now, instead of redirecting straight to the conversation ID, we say if redirect home, throw redirect of 303 to slash. And the reason we do this variable check with the redirect home is because inside this try catch block, if I throw redirect, it won't actually throw redirect. It will just go to this catch block and throw the error. So we actually want to encapsulate the data for the redirection outside of the try catch block over here. So for the final function, let's copy down the remove member. And let's close this. And this is going to be add members. In the add members, we just get the form data. And then in the try block, we say const unparsed members is equal to form data dot get members. Then we check parsed members and parsed members. Then we take off this check, invalid members. So then below this check, we say const members is equal to json.parse parsed members. And then we check if the members is an array. And if it isn't an array, we say throw new error. Invalid members. Now we check if the members array actually has the right length. So if the length is greater than 3, we throw new error, because essentially if it's greater than 3, we already know that they're going over the limit of the conversation. So now we just throw an error saying invalid members. So below this, let's validate the members. So we say validate members. And this is going to be a string array. By the way, just to take off these errors, let's just remove this right here. So to validate the members, below this validate members array, we say for let member of members if type of member does not equal to string throw new error. So we have to check to see if the member actually is a valid member. So item invalid item in members array. And then we just say validated. Let's make sure we name this to validated members. So validated members dot push member. So then we check the conversation. We check if the user is admin. Now we check to see if the amount of users is actually correct. So we say let too much members in total is equal to conversation dot members dot length is no plus validated members dot length is greater than 5. Let's make sure to say conversation. So then we say if too much conversation in total, we throw a new error saying that we can't have that much users in a single conversation. A conversation can have 5 members in total. Total, right there. And then we say let duplicate member. So we check if a member is already added inside. Members.reduce. Then we say previous, which is going to be a boolean, and we also say current. And now we say if the previous, return previous, or return conversation bang members dot includes current. So then we say false. So now if there is a duplicate member, we say if duplicate member, we throw a new error saying that we cannot add member because member is already in the conversation. So then below, we don't actually add the members just like that. We have to make sure to concatenate the previous members. So conversation.members, and we say dot 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 validated members. Members right there. Let's make sure to take this redirect home out of here. Below the conversation name, we have to create a new function called edit conversation photo right here. So then we get the photo like this. Photo, and we make sure that the photo is an instance of. So we say if not photo instance of file, we say invalid photo dot size. So photo dot size invalid photo. Then we take off this check right here, and instead of adding the name, we just edit the photo. And we can finally close this file, and let's open up the local host inside of our browser. Let's sign in. So we can say login danny@email.com. Once we sign in, you can see because I'm not a member, I can't actually edit what is inside the conversation, like the members or the name or the photo, but I could actually leave the conversation. And you see it's deleted. But create a new conversation with my new member test. You see that I could edit members, delete conversation, change the name to whatever name. And you see it's changed. And I could choose an image. I could upload a file, submit, and you see it's edited. And we could change the name. We could edit members. We could take this guy off. But if I take him off, it's going to log us out. So let's create a new member. So let's go here to the profile. Let's log out. Let's create a new name called test2. And the email is going to be test2@email.com. Test. So you see, now that if we log out using this one, and we log in using the Danny email, so we go to whatever name, we go here, we go edit members, we could add, and we could search for test2 right here, and let's add new member. Wait, and let's go back, and let's edit members. Wait, let's refresh just to see if the new member popped up. You see, I have both members here. So now I could delete conversation. I could add these two members. I could remove a member also. And that's all, and that's because I'm an admin. But I hope I served you value using this course. Thank you guys for watching.